Yali Madad, my sisters and brothers. I'm Dr. Shehzad Juma, and I'm the Mental Health Portfolio Member on the National Social Welfare Board. Thank you for joining our webinar. Today our topic is Managing the Stress of COVID-19, a guide for parents and their young children. This webinar is part of a weekly ongoing series aimed to help us stay mentally fit during this pandemic. While we are focusing on parenting and children this week, next week's presentation will be a collaboration between Social Welfare Board and the Smiley Professionals Network, and will be focused on relational health, which will talk about how we can relate better with our loved ones through self-awareness, better communication, and coping. As for today's topic, on parenting with young children, we're all aware that the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a time of uncertainty, feelings of powerlessness, and lots of change in a very short amount of time. Some might even argue that no one has had to make more changes in their daily life than parents of young children. Parenting feels really different right now. We hope that this presentation sheds light on the stress that parents and young children may be struggling with, highlights how parents can take care of themselves, and offer parenting strategies to help young children cope with the drastic new changes in their lives. All parents are welcome, and we think this presentation might be most applicable to parents with children aged birth to 10 years. Let's talk about the structure of today's presentation. We will begin with a moderated discussion for about 40 minutes, which will be followed by a question and answer session. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar by typing your questions in the questions box featured in this picture. Your questions can make all the difference, and if you're thinking of a question, chances are someone else is as well. So please ask. We'll get to as many questions as we can, prioritizing those questions that are asked most. And if you're viewing from a cell phone, please know that you can swipe left or right to view the presentation of either the video of the speakers or the presentation itself. Today's discussion features an expert panelist and moderator. Our expert panelist is Saveen Sundarani, who's a licensed master social worker with a focus on trauma-informed counseling. Saveen treats both adults and children who struggle with mental health or substance use issues. She has extensive knowledge in the field of child development and has served as a mental health expert in many of our Jamaati camps. Our moderator is Sarah Laiwala, who is the head of digital for Regent's Blue Cross Blue Shield, building person-focused healthcare through the use of technology. She also serves as the primary education member on the National Education Board. How perfect. Most importantly for today, she is a mother of a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old, and she will be representing parents as she asks the big questions that parents have been facing during this time. Thank you so much for joining us, Saveen and Sarah.
Thank you for that introduction, Shehzad. I appreciate the opportunity to moderate this panel. It's a topic that's affecting so many families, including mine. So to those of you on this webinar that have joined us today to learn more about the topic and turn your learnings into action, I say welcome and ya Ali Madad. If you've been looking at your Instagram or Facebook accounts, perhaps you're seeing families doing a ton of arts and crafts with their children and they're looking happy. But let me ask you, Saveen, do these parents really have it together? Are they as stressed as the parents on this call or as I am?
Thank you, Sarah. That's a great initial question. I do want to take just a moment here to say Yali Madad to all the parents here today. I am so pleased to be here with my Smiley brothers and sisters, not only to share some insight as a social worker, but also as a fellow parent of a 10-year-old. But getting back to the question, Sarah, I want to start by telling all parents that you're not alone in this time, in these feelings of feeling stress and overwhelmed. We're waking up to disturbing facts about more and more cases of the coronavirus each day. And so it makes sense for our stress levels to be elevated or for us to be feeling scared. Another reason for increased stress during this time is all the changes that we've had to adjust to as parents of young children, and that too in such a short period of time. Many of us have had to add additional roles to our plate, such as teaching, whether that's REC, school, ECDC. And on top of that, parents may be trying to keep up with changes that are happening at their own workplace. And the same goes for children. They're also adjusting to online schooling, not being able to see their friends, not being able to do the activities that they might enjoy. Therefore, stress, feeling scared, feeling overwhelmed, or like you said, not having it together, they're all very appropriate and normal feelings to have at this time.
I'm glad to hear that I'm not the only one feeling stressed then. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you questions about parental stress, and then we'll shift gears and get into questions about child stress. So when it comes to parent stress, some of the places that stress appears for me personally is in my neck and my upper back. Now, everyone is different. So for the parents on this call, what are other ways that stress may manifest for them so that they can identify it and be self-aware?
Sure. So stress and anxiety can show up in lots of different ways. You started by mentioning some physical symptoms. So physical symptoms can be anything like tense body, tense muscles, having headaches, body aches, feeling exhausted, or even having trouble sleeping. Now, stress can also cause mental reactions. And what this would look like is constantly worrying, having a sense of not having control, or feeling scared all the time for yourself or for your family. Or like you said, not having the motivation sometimes to do anything. Those are all ways that stress can manifest in parents. And another way is parents could start to feel inadequate or feel like they're in a sense of overdrive. So again, stress can manifest in physical, mental, and emotional ways.
I see. So how can we deal with this stress and anxiety?
Yeah, I think one thing to remember as we go through this pandemic is, especially for parents, is to prioritize your mental well-being. There is a lot being asked of us as parents, and in order to pour into our children's cups, our own jug must be filled first. Think about what we're instructed to do when we're on an airplane. Parents are always told to put on their own oxygen mask first and then help their children. So similarly, we need to be taking care of ourselves every day while we're going through this pandemic in order to do what we need to do for our children. Now, when you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, try to be intentional about your self-care. Do something nice for yourself, even if it's something small or if it's something that you're doing for just a little while. This can really help bring your stress levels down. Of course, self-care is different for everyone, so it's important to do something that you're going to enjoy. Now, you can also practice relaxation techniques, make sure you're talking to your spouse or any supportive person about your distress. And another tool I'd like to share with you is taking temperature checks of your anxiety. So all you do is simply scan your mind and body and give your anxiety a number on a scale from 1 to 10. Noticing is really the first step. So what this does is it gives you the opportunity to do something about what you're feeling, that stress, anxiety, sooner than later.
Got it. So temperature checks,
Mhm.
relaxation techniques, doing something nice for myself. So if I do all of that, that should, in theory, prevent me from expressing my stress to my children, but we're not perfect. So how else can I prevent my own anxiety from spilling over into my children?
That's a great point because you're right, kids can easily sense their parents' anxiety. So we can start by looking at signs. Some signs that this might be the case is if you see that your children are trying to comfort you more than usual, or that they look concerned when they're looking at you, or if you notice that they are starting to become anxious when you're anxious. And kids can often act out too in response to anxiety. So in order to prevent this from happening, as much as possible, of course, it's important for parents to utilize the skills that we just discussed around managing anxiety and stress, taking care of you, practicing self-care. But in addition to that, being more aware of what types of discussions might be happening when your kids are present, particularly around the topic of the coronavirus. You might also try limiting or eliminating watching the news when the kids are around. So what you're trying to do is limit things that may cause you to have an anxious response and for that to then spill over to your child. Now, although it's best to try not to expose children to our anxiety, like you said, we're not perfect. So if that happens and your anxiety does happen to spill over, that would be a good time to role model your coping skills. And according to age, even talk to them about the importance of coping with such feelings. Share that it's okay to have such feelings. You could say something like, Mommy's feeling really overwhelmed right now. And it's okay to feel that way, but I'm going to take a walk now because that helps me feel nice and calm. So saying something like that.
Got it. So allowing your child to express how they're feeling. It's okay to talk about it. It's actually better not to suppress the conversation. Many parents in general who are on this call and across the United States, they are feeling this pressure to educate their child at home, but also be productive at home, whether they were staying at home previously or whether they're now working from home. What do you recommend for them to manage both the internal and external pressure to be productive?
Well, with all the changes that COVID-19 has brought for us as parents, there's certainly this feeling of pressure, both, like you said, internally and externally. And one of the answers here lies in compassion and forgiveness towards yourself and others. So whether you parents are working from home or still having to go into work, it's okay to feel unmotivated at times or have trouble concentrating. No one can be 100% productive all the time. So we must learn to be flexible with our own expectations and extend ourselves some grace during this time. So if you need to get work done and you direct your child to some play, because that's fine, because even playing is an excellent thing for them to do. Now, I also think that most people are forgiving and understanding, whether that's family members, your supervisors at work, or your children's teachers. And so when you find yourself under a lot of pressure, don't hesitate to ask for what you need at that time. And I'd like to share something I call flexible planning. So start by making your to-do list in terms of priority. So let's say I have 5 or 6 things that I would like to get done tomorrow. What I'll do is I'll star or highlight the top 1 or 2 things that absolutely need to be done, and the other items on the list will just become optional. So if I get to it, that's great, but if not, then that's perfectly okay as well. And so what this will do is set you up for success and guide you to set reasonable goals for the day. And that will in turn help you reduce that pressure to be productive all the time.
Definitely. So flexible planning, forgiveness, that should certainly help. What about the new roles that I have to play all of a sudden? I'm expected to be a music teacher overnight or a science teacher overnight, and many parents are expected to play roles that they haven't played before. It's very overwhelming. How do you deal with that stress?
Well, we all want to be our best parenting selves, but we have to remember that we're still learning as parents how to navigate being in this pandemic and what that means for all of us. So I highly encourage all my fellow parents here to please try to let go of that image of a perfect parent. There's so many activities that are happening online, and that definitely increases the number of shoes that you're trying to fill. But there are only so many hours in the day, and if you're trying to do it all, you could easily get burned out. So I would say give yourself permission to let go of some things that are maybe non-essential. So for example, it's okay if your little one misses the virtual Girl Scouts meeting, or if you're having trouble being the science teacher or the Mandarin teacher. Just do your best right now and know that your child is also not alone in all this and that they will catch up eventually when things get back to normal.
That's helpful. Thank you. So in this time, partners are having to play multiple roles, as I was talking about earlier. How can these spouses work better together? So how can I engage my own spouse to work as a team? How do I work with my partner to co-parent at this time when we both are very stressed out?
Yeah, in order to work together, Sarah, you have to communicate effectively. Couples who talk about their feelings on a regular basis with each other are typically more supportive of each other's needs. So feel free to share your vulnerabilities with your spouse, but also make sure to ask them how they're feeling too. Because like you said, both people could be really stressed right now. And you can start by strategizing together to see how you can ease each other's stress in this time. And you can then start to create some kind of concrete plan. Now, be specific about your needs. So saying something like, I need you to help me make dinner, or I need you to ask me how I'm feeling once a day, or I just need 30 minutes a day to myself, whether that's to read or work out or meditate. And remember to check in with that plan often and see if it's working for both of you. So you could ask each other, what can we change so that this works better for both of us? And this is also a really good time to utilize each other's strengths. Ask your spouse what he or she would like to help with from your to-do list maybe. And saying encouraging words to each other and forgiving can go a long way. As someone told me a few days ago, Sarah, you might remember, the virus here is the enemy, not your spouse. And that has really stuck with me. If for whatever reason your spouse cannot be available, please make sure you're still reaching out to an extended family member, friends, or someone that you can trust so that you still have that support system in place for you right now. And if you live with your family, give grandparents a role as well. Everyone wants to help out, and it really creates an opportunity for your load to be shared. Okay.
Got it. So the virus is the enemy, not my spouse. Sometimes it's very easy to confuse. Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's go into children, and let's talk about what stress looks like in children and how I might have to deal with that, right? So let's start off with the biggest question, which is how can you talk to your child about COVID-19? Is it okay to get into details?
Okay, so one way to work through this is to talk directly about COVID-19 and answer their questions and concerns. Some might think that it's good to avoid the topic, but kids are curious and talking about it can actually relieve their anxiety and worries. So you can explain that in the big picture, not many people are sick and many people are recovering too, but we all have to stop the spread of the germs to keep more people from getting sick. Make sure to assure them that they are safe, and you can share with them what you're doing as parents, as a whole family, to keep everyone safe. So everything that we're doing, right? The hand washing, the disinfecting, the social distancing, all of those things. So sharing that with them would actually help relieve their stress.
That's great. Yeah, today my son and I practiced social distancing and what it means to be standing 6 feet apart. And it was quite helpful. So thank you for this advice. So let's go into the child itself. How does stress and anxiety look in children? How can I identify that as a parent?
So first, we might see it in how they act or behave. So this could look like excessive crying or irritation in younger children. There can be acting out in response to anxiety. Also returning to behaviors that they may have already outgrown. So bedwetting, having accidents. And if they're experiencing any kind of attachment anxiety, you may see some clinginess. So maybe, the child doesn't want you to go to the next room over or doesn't want you to leave the house. Uh, Also, avoiding activities that maybe they used to like to do, such as riding their bike or going outside to play. And you could also see a decline in performance, maybe with their schoolwork and so on. Now, secondly, we might see it in how they think or in their mood. So what this would look like is excessive worry about their own safety or the safety of others. They may be feeling really sad. Some might even be very curious or concerned about death or dying. And some may have difficulty paying attention or be a little zoned out more. And lastly, we may notice some physical symptoms. So what this would look like is fatigue, moving slower, maybe some unexplained tummy aches, headaches. So again, children there's a variety of ways that anxiety can manifest in children.
Okay, so if we were to find that our child is experiencing one of these symptoms, if you will, what can I do to help my child?
So if your child is experiencing worry, it's best to help him or her cope through these feelings rather than avoiding it. So you could start by checking in about what might your child be worried about. So for example, you could ask, what is making you feel scared right now? Or what are you worried about when daddy leaves for work in the morning? You could then go on to ask, how would you help your friend if he or she were feeling worried? And what this does is it allows the child to look at their anxiety objectively and come up with a good solution for it, which you can then encourage them to try out for themselves.
And if their anxiety starts to show up in their body, how can I help the child?
Yeah, so a good way to tend to these physical symptoms is by helping children relax and calm their body, especially when we see them getting all riled up, right? So one way to do this is to teach them to inhale by pretending like they're smelling a flower for about 3 seconds, and then exhale by pretending like they're blowing out a candle, again for about 3 seconds. So what I'm going to do, Sarah, is I'm going to show everyone how to do this, and then maybe we can do this together. So now I have a flower and a candle here, but this can be done as a visualization. So here we go. What we're going to do is, again, we're just going to pretend like we're smelling this beautiful flower for about 3 seconds. So, and then blowing out the candle. So just like that. So maybe we can try it together. Once again, in your nose for about 3 seconds. And 3 seconds blowing out. So this is a great way to teach children. It's a great breathing exercise for young children, and it works for adults as well, of course. What another thing you can do is things that will activate their 5 senses. So for example, for physical touch, you can give them some lotion to massage on their hands. And while they're doing that, ask them to describe in detail how that feels, how it smells, and you could use other items like those for the other senses. And what all this does is it helps them disconnect from their bodily sensation of anxiety that they're feeling. Now, if the physical symptoms still persist after you've taken some of these measures, then you may want to consult with their pediatrician just to rule out any medical concerns at that point.
I see. That's great. I'm going to try the candle and the flower technique. Thank you for that. So let's say that the child, we're trying these techniques and they're not necessarily working. The child is still reacting and with problematic behaviors. Now what do I do?
So I think for problematic behaviors, when you see that the child's anxiety is showing up that way, you can help them by labeling it. So giving them the vocabulary and the words for it, saying something like, I see that you're really upset, or I see that you're really angry. Recognizing and having a name to it will instantly help them calm down a little bit. And then you can ask something like, can you tell mommy or can you tell daddy what you need right now? Or you can ask, do you need a hug right now? And just embracing them for 10 to 30 seconds can instantly be soothing to an anxious child. Now, remember that kids can detect your calm, especially when they feel it from your body. So for very young children, physical interventions can be a lot more effective than verbal ones.
Okay. And for the parents on the call, right, such as myself, we're all going through so much. And as we have to teach and we have to work and we've got to be the parent simultaneously, finding the right balance in disciplining your child versus letting things slide is challenging. What do you recommend for me if I'm feeling guilty about disciplining my child? How do I discipline my child? What's the right balance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I can understand and relate to this as a parent myself. So, parents might be feeling guilty about discipline right now, but we do know that kids need rules in order to regulate themselves and feel a sense of safety. So, the rules of discipline still apply during COVID-19. The important thing to know is that enforcing fair rules will actually be helpful to them. So you want to think about positive reinforcement and how they can work towards being rewarded instead of avoid being punished. So for example, we will go outside and play catch in the afternoon if you finish your online lesson this morning. Instead of you're not going to go play outside if you don't finish your lesson. Also be thinking about natural consequences. So for example, if the lessons aren't completed in time, you won't be getting your completion sticker from Miss Jane. Something like that, like a natural consequence of their behavior. Now, because of the outbreak, please parents do consider talking to them about their feelings if they're misbehaving. So saying something like, I know you're bored right now or you're missing your friends, but you cannot yell at your brother or sister. Let's take 10 minutes of quiet time and then let's talk about how we can help you solve this problem. So really just looking a little deeper for underlying feelings, but definitely not abandoning all rules or discipline.
Got it. So definitely, I think many of us as parents at this time, especially, resort to threats over positive reinforcement. And so we can all, we're not perfect, but we can do the best we can to use positive reinforcement. So there are a lot of parents currently confused about screen time, right? The AAP recommends that children of certain ages shouldn't watch more than 1 hour of TV, or there's a ton of recommendations out there. What guidance do you have now? Do we just throw this out the window?
Well, you're right. A lot of us are confused, and I want everyone to know that it's okay to relax some of these rules within reason. So, for example, normally screen times during school nights might be limited to none, right? But if you decide to relax these boundaries a bit and allow an hour or so of this because school is canceled or it's online now, that's okay. But the type of content you choose is more important. So pick shows with role models, learnings, or live events like they're doing from the zoo. Sarah, I believe the AKB will have a great list going up live soon on the Smiley USA. Is that correct?
Yes, inshallah. And we are distributing them on the Ismaili Insight as well.
Okay,
So
that would be
I'm
great.
a lot about setting routines and schedules as well, right? This is all overwhelming. Every parent is trying to figure out what type of schedule they should choose for their child. What do you recommend for someone who's feeling stressed and anxious already? What type of schedule can you recommend for a family that's going through a lot already?
So, yeah, you're right. There really has been a lot of stress put on the need for routine and schedules during this time of COVID-19. I really encourage parents to have some type of routine or schedule, simply because this can be beneficial in creating, again, a sense of control, predictability, and increased focus for yourself and your child. The key word, however, here is flexible. A schedule right now does not need to be perfect. It's more of a guideline for the day. So if you have a schedule and you end up having to change course because the child didn't take the nap at the time that you had in mind, that's okay. Simply adjust and try to get back on your schedule whenever that's possible. So treat schedules like a guideline now.
I see. So if I have a preschooler or a school-age child, what might that schedule look like?
So generally, you want to divide the day up into parts, and each part can include a coping skill for the child that will help them feel centered and grounded. It's also important to do something each day to get their bodies moving. Once a day is good, but we do recommend twice a day. This can also be a nice outdoor break just for the parents themselves. Remember again that the schedule is more of a guideline. You may need to take other things into account, such as safety, like for example, playgrounds are not a good idea for outdoors right now, maybe the weather, or even your own work schedule. So let's take a look at this first example, which is for a young toddler or a preschooler. And as you can see, parents, we've divided this into basically 3 simple parts, which is morning, afternoon, and evening. And in the morning, there's a little bit more structure. There's your breakfast, morning prayers, educational activities or structured play, physical activity like a morning walk. And in the afternoon, you can have something like reading, puzzle time, a simple chore for this preschooler, maybe a nap, would be scheduled in the afternoon, and then they can also have another outdoor activity if possible in the afternoon. And the evening time is more wash up, dinner, evening prayers, and an excellent time to incorporate some family time. A lot of times we've been so busy and we haven't been able to maybe do this, and so this would be a good time to incorporate that. And we can also look at a schedule for an older child. And this is, again, divided into those same parts, morning, afternoon, and evening. And in the morning, you can see that there's some school and online work. As they're older, they may have more work to do on that. They could do a Zumba video or maybe a child-friendly home workout. In the afternoon, they could do reading, Legos, their chores. They can also put in a fun activity if they like to bake or art, and then maybe add in a second physical activity if possible. And then the evening is almost the same with the dinner, evening prayers, and some family time, board games. So again, what I want to emphasize that it's not necessarily what's in the schedule that makes a difference. It's that having one creates the sense of control and predictability for you and your child. So if you have a schedule, you can also look forward to some breaks, right? You can schedule those breaks in, and that could be something that you would look forward to. And if you're a parent who's feeling stressed because it's hard to think of creative activities to do to fill in your day, I'd really recommend looking for suggestions online. In fact, Sarah, you must know AKB has created recommended and more detailed schedules with specific suggestions for what parents and children can do. So I really encourage parents to check that out, because that will be very beneficial if you're looking for things to fill your day with and you feel like you're stressed and you're running out of activities. That would be a great resource.
Thanks, Savine. I think at this time, play, as long as a child is playing, that's probably the most critical. Play and love is probably the most critical features, if you will, that they need in their daily life right now. So recommendation for everybody, parent and child. What are some healthy coping strategies we can use during this pandemic?
So The first thing I would say is to try not to borrow worry from the future. We tend to, our thoughts and our mind tend to kind of go into the future, and it's hard to focus, and it creates a lot of anxiety. So really bring your focus back to today, in the present moment, and focusing one day at a time, because we know there's a lot of changes happening on a daily basis. So really just focusing one day at a time, focusing on things that you can control, writing that down even on a daily basis, because what that does is it allows your mind to see that you do have control over things in your environment. Focusing on your health, both physical and mental, religious practices, that's a great way to cope. Also finding something each day that gives you a sense of purpose, whether that's a couple chapters out of a book, a workout challenge, a DIY project, learning a new skill. All of those things give us a sense of purpose. Journaling is also excellent, and I recommend that. And you could do this by making it very simple. So maybe writing down 3 things that you are looking forward to today. So maybe I'm looking forward to reading for 30 minutes, FaceTiming with my best friend, or cooking my favorite meal. And you can end the day by writing 3 things down that went very well for you. So that could be an example of, I was able to get some work submitted that I needed to. I enjoyed the board games that we played as a family, and I got to work out for 30 minutes, and that felt great. So these are all different ways for us to cope with what's going on.
What if I've tried everything and my stress, my anxiety, my depression for me or my child feels so overwhelming during this time? What's next?
Yeah, so you're right. Stress, anxiety, and depression can really get the best of us, and we all need help sometime. If you're having difficulty controlling these feelings of anxiety or depression, or you notice that these symptoms are not going away in yourself or your child, it's time to reach out for help. And I really encourage everyone to do that. Talk to your family or friends and tell someone you trust how you're feeling. You can also find local resources online, like local support groups. You can find programs and apps that can be helpful. There's mindfulness apps, meditation apps. You can also talk to your PCP or pediatrician and share with them how you're feeling. That's often a good place to get started. Talk to a licensed mental health professional, and remember that even during COVID-19, PCPs, pediatricians, and licensed mental health professionals are more available than ever through telehealth. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. That's an excellent resource if you're in crises. And the crisis text line, that 741-741, is another great resource for those of us who are tech savvy, or if making a call just seems too hard.
That's wonderful. Thank you for offering all of those suggestions. So I'm going to open up questions to the audience. And we've received some great audience questions. And to the audience, please keep them coming in the questions panel, and we're going to try to get through as many as we can. So the first one is, what can older children do when they see their parents become more anxious or depressed?
Can you repeat that question? I think you cut off a little bit.
What can older children do when they see their parents become more anxious or depressed?
So for older children, I really suggest that you help them, again, talk to them about it, because they are verbal. They're able to communicate with their parents, ask them how they're feeling, and try to get to those underlying feelings. Maybe they're feeling scared about COVID-19 or something else. Maybe they're worried about their schoolwork. So really having that conversation with them and sharing your coping skills with them. So the coping skills that we talked about, like the breathing exercises or the journaling, all of those are really good ways for them to start implementing those coping skills in their own life, and that should help some with their worries or their stress or anxiety that they might be feeling right now.
All right, thank you. Next question. How do I manage feelings of anger and frustration at my children?
Yeah, so anger and frustration are very normal emotions to feel. I like to think of these difficult emotions as messengers. And if you really lean in and pay attention, your anger will tell you exactly which of your needs may not being met right now. So, for example, if you're feeling angry because your child is fussy or because he or she is not listening, think about what the message is in that. Maybe it's that you're not getting the support you need. Maybe it's that you're tired and you need some sleep. So try taking an inventory of what you're not getting and see if you can do some problem solving to make that happen or to get that need met. Another thing that would be helpful to manage these emotions is to really be aware of your body and notice where you feel that anger. Are you feeling that anger in your shoulders, in your chest, in your stomach? So once you're able to notice this, check to see when you've taken your last break or had some space to yourself. And I know for parents here, we all have young children, and it can seem really difficult to think about breaks right now. But you can get creative with it, right? Even when you're with your kids. You can walk away to the other room saying that you need to get something and use that time to just get some space and take some deep breaths. One father I know even played this game, Sarah, called See What You Can Put on Papa's Back, as he just laid there on the couch and took some time to relax. So this is a time for us to really get creative, and take that space to do those deep breathing exercises, or just get some space to ourselves so we can calm down. Now, there are times when our anger gets the best of us as parents, and we may end up taking that anger out on our children. Anger is not a bad thing. It's what we do with it that matters, right? So it's important to remember that children just soak up this anger that we, put on them, and like a sponge, and it can be very hurtful to them. So if you're feeling very angry, you must ensure that what you're doing with that emotion is not in any way harming your children or your relationship with them. And my hope is that our children will come out of this pandemic knowing more than ever that no matter what difficulty they face, they will always be loved and protected by their parents.
All right, thank you. Next question. My 8-year-old son is so used to being indoors for the last 2 to 3 weeks that he's unwilling to go outside in the backyard for a walk or to play. What can I do to encourage him to go outdoors for a few minutes on a daily basis?
So I would say that to encourage a child, he or she may be feeling scared to go outside. That could be an underlying reason of why the child may not want to go outside, especially if they did enjoy that activity before. So you could encourage them by first trying to understand what the reason is and addressing that, maybe problem solving with them, providing some reassurance. And then again, maybe even explaining that, we are safe if we go outside as long as we're not touching surfaces. So that type of reassurance. And maybe just doing something fun as a family, so that everyone is outside, everyone's having fun, and that might just have the child want to do those things rather than it become a chore. So maybe just making it like a fun thing for everybody.
All right. Next question. I am a parent of a 4-year-old. What if positive reinforcement doesn't work to get the child to do anything?
That's a good one. So I have to think back to when I had a 4-year-old, but again, there could be some underlying things. We also have to be a little flexible and lenient with our kids right now, because we need to understand that they've had a very big change in their life right now. So, maybe they were used to a lot of structure and a routine, right? So they were waking up, eating breakfast, going to daycare, going to preschool, and they were being disciplined or taught by teachers, and now they're in this whole new different environment. So I would really say that I really encourage some leniency, some flexibility. Transition times could be different for a 4-year-old than what they used to be. So allowing more transition time from one activity to another. And also, again, kind of going easy on that schedule as well. Maybe it's too much for a 4-year-old right now to follow a particular schedule at home, things like that.
So on the next question, we've already addressed this a bit, but there are several follow-up questions on screen time. So children are asking for more and more screen time than ever before. I've heard from fellow parents about the increased guilt of screen time their kids are getting during this time. It's not always easy to direct kids to play on their own, especially if parents need to get work done. Should parents feel guilty about the additional screen time? And how should they manage this feeling of guilt?
That's a really good question. So I'm going to start by saying that parents don't need to feel guilty about a little bit extra screen time. Kids are also trying to, again, manage this concept of how to fill their day. And so they're probably trying to fill their day with iPads and, more screen time. So if the parents need to get work done, it's okay to allow that screen time to happen. And kind of like we talked before, we could always choose certain things that we are allowing them to watch. They could be doing a live, like we at the zoo, NASA. There's a lot of live educational stuff happening online. So I really encourage parents who need to get work done and whose kids are asking for more screen time to just structure that screen time to become educational, or have them do a online yoga class, something where they feel like they're also getting their screen time, but you also don't need to really feel guilty if they're doing something educational or for learning purposes online.
I personally have been encouraging my 4-year-old to watch Magic School Bus, Daniel Tiger. And so commonsensemedia.org has several suggestions on what screen time or what media is okay for children to watch, like things with role model, etc. They also have story time, so children can listen to Audible podcasts. There's a variety of things, and as AKB lead here, we're happy to mail it out after the webinar. And also, continue to check with the Ismaili Insight, and we will have this soon up on the Ismaili USA as well.
That's excellent.
So on the fifth question, or the sixth question here, is what is your take on video games, and how much of it is too much depending on the child's age, including elementary, middle, and high schoolers?
So video games, I believe that's also considered into that screen time. I would really just try to keep it to a minimum. Again, we need to be somewhat flexible. So if the rule is 30 minutes, maybe it can be a little bit more, but I wouldn't just let it go completely and allow the child to play as many video games as possible. Again, this is and as an older child, maybe even upper elementary, middle, and high school, you can have the conversation about how this time that we have can be so constructive. It's really up to us on how we utilize this situation and this time. If we adopt a more of a growth mindset, we can utilize this time to learn, to grow, to do the things that we never had time to do. And also, we can incorporate things like video games and screen time and things like that. So it's not that we're completely abandoning that, but this is such a time that we can actually use constructively to help ourselves grow and become more connected with the family. So I would frame it in that way, that we're not saying no completely, but we want to really focus on the importance of what we can do with our time here.
Next question. Both men and women have a lot going on right now, but some men worry more than women. What would be your recommendation for men to control their anxiety?
Yeah, that's good. So for men, I really encourage the focus on one day at a time, because there's only so much you can do and control about this situation and about COVID-19. If there's financial stress, I really encourage men to reach out, whether that's to other men, other people that you know, friends, family, or even the institutions. I know Economic Planning Board is doing weekly seminars and webinars like these that are very, very helpful. So, and also I encourage men to, reach out to their spouse and have that conversation. This is how I'm feeling, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. I think, men have this idea where they kind of have to be the lead of the family, so they may not want to talk about it, but this is the time where you get to share, and hopefully, the spouses and family members will be supporting each other throughout this. So for men, I would really, say focus one day at a time. Know that you're doing everything that you can to ensure that you and your family are safe. And other than that, please reach out for help if you need it.
What if both parents are not on the same page about setting limits with their children? How can they work together as a team?
So I would really go back to the effective communication. One thing I would say is that a lot of times when we validate each other's feelings and thoughts by saying something like, I see what you're saying here, or I can understand where you might be coming from. When we validate each other's thoughts and feelings, what it does is the other person is not on the defensive anymore. And we've just built that foundation for effective communication. Now the other person is more willing to listen, more willing to understand. So in order to, start that effective communication process, if your spouse is not, on the same page with you, I know that can be stressful, that can be difficult, and there may not be a perfect solution or answer for that. But I would really suggest, starting to communicate in ways that validates that person's feelings or thoughts, and maybe even asking more questions like, what do you think, these relaxed rules how would that be helpful to me or the children, or us as a family? So asking the right types of questions and validating each other.
Next question. My child is 6 years old and he shows his anxiety by crying a lot, especially now given the situation. What can I do to help him and myself?
So for the excessive crying, I really suggest, and the child is 6 years old, so you could have conversations with your child in a age appropriate way. You can do certain activities with them to kind of make them feel safe. If that anxiety is showing up, it might be, again, worry, all the changes that are happening. So bringing in predictability for the day, letting the child know that this is what we're looking forward to for tomorrow, kind of creating that excitement for the day, for the next day. Maybe doing things that that the kid is going to really, really enjoy. And when your child is crying, that's okay too. Crying is not a bad thing. So just hold your child, provide them with that comfort and love and care, and just try to soothe them with those, that physical touch. And again, those activities that we talked about, like with the lotion and things like that, that's very grounding, and it would help with disconnecting their body with that anxiety symptom that they might be feeling inside. So I would say validate them, try to do your best to problem solve, but at the same time, crying is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's all you really have to do at that time is hold them and allow them to have that feeling, and tell them that it's okay to be sad and it's okay to cry.
How can we as parents encourage routine with children?
So for routine, I think the best way to approach that is sitting down, making a plan together, having your child invested in that routine and schedule, if possible, if they're old enough. Also doing that a night before, so you're not waking up and then creating a schedule, but you already know what that routine or schedule looks like. And really, again, if your children are old enough, please have them do that with you. If they're invested in it, then you won't have to do a lot of redirection throughout the day, because they will be, already invested. They'll already be a part of it.
Okay. Next question. My 3-year-old is unwilling to work with his dad and wants mom to take care of everything. He's rejecting his dad a lot more during this time. How can I help?
I think you can help by being there right now. You want your child to be comfortable with both parents, and that's very understandable. But right now, it seems to me that the child is really feeling comfortable and protected and, loved with you. And it's okay for this time. Again, this is a very different time. Now, if it gets excessive and it prolongs even after, COVID-19 and all this is over, then maybe you would, talk to your pediatrician or a professional. But right now, it seems to me that that's where the child is finding support and love and security. So it's okay for the child to just be with mom. Mom just has to make sure that she's taking care of herself, and that the husband or the dad is supporting mom so that she can also get some time in between.
So, will giving in and relaxed limit setting with screen time backfire when COVID is over?
I think if you are clear with your children that this is, based on this situation, and that will teach them that we are humans and we are allowed to adjust things as per life happens, and that there is no cookie cutter way. And this is how life is. And I think that we might, as parents, experience some pushback or some resistance when we go back to normal and we're saying, whoa, you can't stay up till 10, you have to be in bed at 8 or something like that. We may experience that, and that's okay too. That's okay too. It's just about being consistent and helping the child understand that this is a unique situation, and that's why we have these unique rules now.
Next question. My husband feels it's appropriate to spank kids when they misbehave, as we were disciplined the same way during his childhood. Any thoughts on this approach?
So, that's a topic that, it's difficult to say what spanking and how much and where we draw that line, right, between spanking and abuse. So, as I mentioned earlier, anger management is important for us right now, because we as parents, again, we have a big load to carry. And if that anger is coming out on the child, then we have to understand that that can be very hurtful to a child who's already going through some difficult times. So I really encourage that we stay away from physical discipline, and we try to work towards understanding the child and setting limits and disciplining in other ways. Like we said, that can be a line that can get crossed very easily. And we want our kids to really know and truly believe from the inside that we're here to love them and protect them from any difficult situation that they're facing.
Savine, I might add that there is a very famous parenting style called Love and Logic that uses firm, loving limits and enforceable statements instead of anger, lecturing, spanking, or using threats. And they're offering their webinar for free right now for the month of April. So if you visit Love and Logic, it's by Jim Fay. You can go through the webinars on that and get great tips there. As you know, where we haven't been able to get specific today, you can get specific there. And there's one more question, Savine, regarding AKEB materials for preschoolers. So if you don't mind, I'll take that one. We've just launched virtual ECDC at home, where we're providing ECDC teachers and families with virtual materials that parents can do at home with their child and then check in with virtual trainers and coaches. And so if you are not aware of it or you'd love to get connected, reach out to your ECDC principal for your Jamaat Khana or for your Mukhi Sahib or to your Mukhi Sahib to get connected with the materials.
Okay.
Someone's asking me to repeat the love and logic statement. So if you Google love and logic, there is a website that will come up, and we can share it after the webinar as well. I believe it's loveandlogic.com, and they are offering a free webinar. So I believe the package is normally $70, but right now for the month of April, for all parents, they're offering their services for free. So please check that out. All right, I believe that's it for questions.